It is now my pleasure to introduce Steve Rappleyea, the Assistant Superintendent of Lakeland.
Good morning. When I began my journey in education, I began as a school psychology intern. I got a lot of great advice. Wash your hands often, take vitamin C, be really nice to the principal's secretary. But what I did not get was preparation for my first day as a school psychology intern. I went into the middle school where I was going to be meeting the psychologist. His name was Russ Schwartz. As I was going in, he was running out. He said, "Where are you parked?" I said, "Right in front." He said, "Come on, let's go." He jumped in my car with a parent. I drove the car, panicked, down the road, and we picked up a student who was walking away from the school that had jumped out of his mother's car. About 1 in 2 out of every 100 students experience school phobia-related disorders and panic at going to school. For that student in that middle school, he, like other students, suffer from a paralyzing fear of leaving the safety of their home. The child's panic and refusal to go to school is very difficult for parents to cope with, but these fears and behavior can be treated successfully with professional help. So why don't they attend? The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry notes that refusal to go to school often begins following a period of being at home. As a part of my middle school experience, during the 8th grade, I contracted chickenpox. That illness kept me home for about 5 days. During that period of time at home, I began to feel more and more anxious about returning to school, to catching up on the work that I was missing. I was terrified at the prospect of returning to school. After being out for a week, I was terrified that I would be well behind and never catch up. Now, evolutionists taught us that in order to survive, we must avoid things that make us feel sick, scared, and hurt, treating everything like a tiger in the bushes. So how can we solve these sorts of problems for our students? The problem of school refusal and avoidance. Think about that youngster at that middle school. What could have been done the day before that incident? What could have been done the week or month before? Our work probably could have been made much easier if we had a plan in place. As education professionals, my assumption is that we have chosen this career because in some way we like school. Agreed? I would also suggest that though we have some tough days, on balance, we enjoy our work. But have you ever had a job that you really disliked, a workplace you really did not look forward to? Well, now imagine that difficult workplace, and further imagine that both the government and your mommy were forcing you to go there. It would be distressing. Lots of events can impact children in the same way that my chickenpox episode had on me. Any long-term illness or absence from school can create a loss of connection to school that creates an opportunity for a more severe reaction to creep in. With evolution teaching us to avoid things that make us feel sick, hurt, or scared, school begins to become paired with those feelings of sick, hurt, and scared, and voila, we are no longer freely able to attend without anxiety. A child's thinking becomes so disordered that they are literally terrified of school. School refusal is not willful naughtiness or truancy. School refusal is a type of clinical anxiety disorder. School refusal behavior has no single cause, because rather it has a broad range of contributing factors that include the individual, family, school, and community. These factors can be organized into 4 categories: avoidance of school-based stimuli, avoidance of stressful social situations, pursuit of attention from significant others, or pursuit of tangible reinforcers outside of school. Like all serious psychiatric disorders, school refusal comes with a complex constellation of serious symptoms, symptoms that have both cognitive, behavioral, and physiological effects. The behavioral symptoms are easiest to detect or notice from a distance from our collected information as a school, right? We can see students having a tantrum or screaming or pleading with their parent not to attend school. These symptoms can occur at the schoolhouse door, as the parent is bringing the student to the schoolhouse, or as they're thinking about going to the schoolhouse. The actual physical changes that someone undergoes while in the throes of an anxiety or panic reaction have actual physical consequences. The reactions brought about by the phobic thought cycle are physiologically no different than if you were in actual danger for your life. The metabolic changes are part of what we call the fight, freeze, flight reaction. A cholinergic response activates our sympathetic nervous system, making our heart rate faster, our breathing more shallow, our mouths dry, et cetera, and so forth. It's literally as if we see a tiger in the bushes. We humans attempt to make sense of these feelings. Remember, we are programmed by evolution to avoid those things that make us sick, hurt, and scared, to be aware of the tiger in the bushes hunting us. We will tell ourselves stories that help us to make sense of and predict the world around us. If you think of a child with school refusal as believing that there is a tiger in the bushes at school, their behavior makes a lot more sense. A cycle of physiological reaction gets paired with stimuli, the school, and is strengthened by the very relief one feels when they manage to avoid it. So if all 50 of our students in Lakeland that experience these factors kept showing up to our big brick boxes like the other 5,600, we have a chance to help them. We have filled the boxes with teachers, technology, curriculum, resources. We've even sprinkled in some nurses, social workers, counselors, and psychologists. But here's the ironic problem. These very kids who need the resources that we have put in the big brick box don't show up. So, if the big brick box where all the resources are is where all the resources are, how do we get them back through the front door? If they are not willing to enter, whether through the screaming, distressing intercessions of their parents or the demands of the staff who call home, so what is it that every single one of us find ourselves doing at some point? Whether our colleague Tarkan Singh with 200 or so students in his district, or Jose Carrion with 12,000 students in his district, each superintendent in this room has the daunting responsibility to make sure that some mechanism in his or her district gathers the students back to the schoolhouse door. And here's the mechanism. But the lesson here is not that we have buses, it is what we can do with them. If they won't come to us, we have to go to them. This is not something we do often, but it is important to do. Our most effective interventions for students with severe school refusal involve our clinicians leaving that big brick box. We literally send staff by twos to the homes of students who are not attending with a bus to bring those students back in. Those staff, with the permission of the parents, enter the home and work with the student at home and begin to bring them back closer to school. One of the key levers in how we shift student behavior is first in helping them adjust their thoughts. Cognitive behavioral therapy allows us to change how students think about problems in order to change their reactions to the problems. Have you ever feared or worried about something in the future, say a presentation to several hundred of your closest friends? What you tell yourself about that situation will predict how you react. We can take what we know about how to treat anxiety and bake it into the recipe for school programming. By using structured interventions by highly trained staff, dialectical behavior therapy, mindfulness training, cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, parent training, continued in vivo supports, those supports outside the brick box, that can allow us to restore students to functioning. Now, our parent partners in this work can often be overwhelmed at the least, and in some situations are major problem as a part of the process in solving the problem for the student. For instance, I worked in one district with a parent who as her child was 15, was still bathing him. Now, this was not something that the school district could intervene in. This required us to bring in some other resources. And we began working with a clinician in the community who would go to the home and work more intensively with them. That is beyond the scope of the school district, but the partnership is not. Now, think of little Steve in the chicken pox, out of school for 1 week and lost. What academic reentry plan did he need? How could Steve today get a better set of supports delivered? Without key academic supports and reentry procedures, students who are out a long time can face tremendous obstacles to reentry. Providing opportunities for distance learning and tutoring, well, that was exciting, and reentry procedures could further reduce the problem. In Lakeland, we have a number of programs that support students who have difficulty with school. We began a program several years ago called the Bridge Program. It was designed to help students returning to school after a traumatic brain injury reintegrate into school. It was a quiet place with dim lighting, a clinician and a teaching assistant in place, and teachers would go into the space to work with students. Well, it just so happens that that type of environment worked tremendously well for students with school anxiety and returning to school. We also have a more organized special education program that's larger, has more capacity for students, that is designed to treat emotionally fragile students. In that place, both Bridge and Oasis use dialectical behavioral therapy techniques, have clinicians who are highly trained and professional, and actually do work that is much more like treatment than we typically do in schools. In both of those situations, Oasis and Bridge, we have continued complex parent supports. Now, it is, so what have we learned in this conversation today? School refusal is a complex anxiety reaction. It's not naughtiness, it's not truancy. We also learned that we have to go where they are. We have to leave that big brick box. We have to train staff in cognitive behavioral therapy techniques in order for them to do interventions that actually are research proven to work with students. We have to provide the space and the resources for students and provide community supports that connect them to resources in the community that can ultimately do that complex work that we cannot. Any district can access these supports, whether you're a tiny district or a large district. It's a matter of who you partner with and how you combine resources. But ultimately, planning and thoughtfully implementing these resources will allow us to bring these students back through the schoolhouse door. Thank you.